Imagine the first silence after the first murder. Just a man standing in a field soaked with his brother's blood and the weight of a universe that had just changed forever. The ground itself had opened its mouth and drunk what should never have been spilled. And now God was asking a question, not because he did not know the answer, but because the answer needed to be heard out loud by the one who had spoken it with his hands. "Where is Abel, your brother?" 4 words. And the silence that followed them was the heaviest silence in human history. Cain answered with a lie dressed as indifference. "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Those words have echoed across every century since, repeated by every generation that has chosen to look away from the suffering of another. But what happened next is the part that almost no one reads carefully. God did not strike Cain dead. God did not call down fire. God spoke a curse. But then, in a move that has baffled theologians and scholars for thousands of years, God did something that defies every expectation of divine justice. He protected him. He placed upon Cain a mark, a sign, a seal, and declared that anyone who killed Cain would suffer vengeance 7 times over. The first murderer in human history walked away from that encounter with a divine guarantee of survival. That should stop you cold. For centuries, the church, the academy, and the culture at large have bent this mark into the shape of their own fears and prejudices. In the Middle Ages, theologians debated whether it was a physical deformity, a horn, a tremor, a brand burned into skin. In the 17th and 18th centuries, some preachers, to their eternal shame, twisted this passage into a racial ideology, claiming the mark justified the enslavement of entire peoples. That interpretation was not only morally catastrophic, it was scripturally illiterate. It was a lie built on a lie, a distortion so complete that it took the very mercy of God and transformed it into a weapon of oppression. The Mark of Cain has perhaps been more abused than almost any other symbol in the entire Bible. But here is what the text actually says, and what it does not say. Genesis chapter 4, verse 15 reads, "And the Lord said to him, Therefore whoever kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him 7-fold. And the Lord set a mark on Cain, lest anyone finding him should kill him." Notice what is absent. There is no description of the mark. There is no color, no shape, no location on the body. The Hebrew word used is oath, the same word used elsewhere in Scripture for a sign, a signal, a token of covenant. It is the same word used when God set a rainbow in the sky after the flood. It is the same word used for the blood on the doorposts in Egypt. The OTH was never meant to be a brand of shame. It was a sign of something far more theologically explosive. The Mark of Cain was, at its core, a mark of grace. Not the cheap grace that looks the other way at sin. God had already pronounced the curse, the exile, the severed relationship with the fertile earth. Cain would wander. Cain would toil without reward. Cain had broken something in the fabric of creation that could not simply be sewn back together. The consequences were real, and they were severe. But God's response to Cain's anguish, "My punishment is greater than I can bear," was not contempt. It was protection. In the middle of the severest judgment, grace moved. And that tension, that paradox, is the real heartbeat of this passage, the truth that has been buried under centuries of misreading. Some scholars in the Jewish rabbinic tradition have suggested the mark was a letter, specifically the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Tav, written on Cain's forehead. In ancient Hebrew script, the Tav was written as a cross. Let that image settle for a moment. The sign that protected the first murderer may have been a cross-shaped mark placed by God himself. Whether or not that specific interpretation is historically certain, it points towards something the New Testament would later make undeniable: that divine mercy does not wait for human worthiness before it moves. God marked Cain not because Cain deserved to live, but because God is the author of life, and no human being, no matter how deep their guilt, falls outside the reach of his sovereign purpose. There is another dimension that most people never reach because they stop at the surface reading. The mark also functioned as a social and cosmic declaration. Cain was entering a world beyond Eden, a world that the text implies already had other inhabitants, a detail that has generated its own centuries of debate. When God said, "Whoever finds him," he was acknowledging a real danger. Cain feared retribution from others, feared the blood vengeance logic of a world without courts or law. The mark was God inserting himself as Cain's advocate in a system of justice he had not yet formally given to humanity. It was a preemptive act of divine authority over the chaos of human vengeance. God was saying, "This man's life is not yours to take. His judgment belongs to me." And this is where the mark becomes something not just historical, but prophetic. Because the same tension lives in every human soul that has ever carried the weight of something irreversible. Every person who has done the unthinkable and wondered if there is any road back. Every community that has cast someone out and called it justice. Every theology that has used Scripture as a hammer rather than a mirror. The Mark of Cain asks a question that echoes forward all the way to the cross, all the way to the book of Revelation, all the way to the moment when the judge of all the earth will finally make right everything that was made wrong. The question is not, what was the mark? The question is, what does it mean that God gave it? We have spent millennia arguing about the shape of the sign and missed the weight of the hand that placed it. We have built ideologies on a passage that was never about race, never about punishment as spectacle, never about God abandoning the guilty to the mob. It was about a God who looks at the worst moment of the worst person and chooses, in the same breath as judgment, to also choose preservation. That is not comfortable theology. That is not the God we invented for ourselves, the God who only blesses the clean and strikes down the corrupt. That is the God of the Bible, the God of blood and fire and mercy all at once, whose ways are higher than our ways as the heavens are higher than the earth. The mark of Cain is not a curse you can see. It is a grace too profound to fully comprehend. And if you think you have understood it, you have probably only just begun.